In the days when the Olympians still walked more freely among the growing powers of the world, there was a goddess whose care was not for war or kingship or the restless ambitions of gods, but for the deep, quiet life of the earth itself. Her name was Demeter, and she was the mother of the grain, the guardian of the ripening fields, the one who taught the first humans how to break the soil with wooden plows, how to place seed within the dark earth, and how to wait through the long patience of seasons for the return of life. Wherever she walked, the ground remembered her. Barley grew thick in her footsteps. Olive trees leaned toward the sound of her voice. Of all the loves she carried, none was deeper or more fiercely guarded than the love she bore for her daughter Persephone. Persephone was the child of Demeter and Zeus, though the king of the gods claimed little part in her raising. She grew in the bright meadows and shaded groves that her mother tended, moving through the world with a lightness that seemed almost too delicate for the age of iron and thunder that had followed the wars of the Titans. The other goddesses watched her with a mixture of tenderness and distance, for she was not fierce like Athena, nor restless like Artemis, nor sovereign in beauty like Aphrodite. She was simply young, and the earth itself seemed to brighten wherever she walked. Flowers opened as she passed. The air grew sweeter. Even the wild bees lingered near her, as though the world itself preferred her presence to any other. It was on a day of ordinary loveliness that the great rupture began. Persephone had gone into a wide meadow far from her mother's side, accompanied by a company of ocean nymphs who laughed and sang as they gathered flowers. The grass stood high and soft. The air was warm with the breath of early summer, and the world still held the uncomplicated brightness of a time before this particular sorrow had been written into its laws. She moved among the blossoms with easy delight, filling her arms with color, until she saw a flower of uncommon beauty rising alone near the center of the meadow. A bloom so perfect that it seemed to have been placed there for her alone. As her fingers closed around the stem, the ground beneath her feet shuddered and split open with a violence that silenced the birds mid-song and sent the nymphs screaming toward the distant trees. From the sudden chasm rose Hades, lord of the underworld, standing in a chariot drawn by 4 black horses, whose manes streamed like smoke. He had long desired the girl in silence, and Zeus, who was both her father and the keeper of divine balances, had given his quiet consent to the taking. There was no prolonged struggle in the meadow. Hades reached down, seized Persephone about the waist, and drew her into the chariot as easily as a man lifts a sheaf of wheat. The earth closed again above them with a sound like the shutting of a vast door. One moment, the meadow held the laughter of a goddess and the bright colors of gathered flowers. The next, it held only the abandoned blossoms, the scattered baskets of the nymphs, and the fading echo of a cry that no one above the ground would answer. When Demeter returned to the meadow and could not find her daughter, she did not at first understand the scale of what had been taken from her. She called Persephone's name across the fields and through the orchards, her voice rising from concern into rising panic. She questioned the nymphs, who trembled and could tell her only that the earth itself had opened and swallowed the girl whole. She wandered for 9 days and 9 nights without tasting ambrosia or nectar, without resting, carrying torches in both hands so that even the darkness would not hide what she sought. She searched the hills and the shorelines, the deep forests and the shadowed places where a frightened girl might have hidden. The sun rose and set upon her grief, and the moon looked down upon her as she climbed rocky paths and crossed cold streams, and still she found no trace. On the 10th day, as she stood exhausted at the edge of a dark wood, she encountered Hecate, the ancient goddess of the crossroads and the night, who had heard the girl's cry from deep within her cave. Together, they went to Helios, the all-seeing sun, who alone among the powers of the sky had witnessed the abduction from his chariot. Helios, unable to refuse the mother's demand, told her the truth without softening it, that Hades had risen from the depths and taken Persephone with the consent of Zeus, and that the girl now sat as queen in the cold halls beneath the earth. The knowledge did not bring Demeter peace. It brought a cold and terrible clarity that settled into her bones like winter. She withdrew her presence from the world. The fields that had once answered her care with abundance now withered beneath an indifferent sky. The seed that had been placed in the soil with hope failed to rise. The trees held back their fruit until the branches stood bare and brittle. The cattle grew thin in the pastures, and the bees abandoned their hives. A slow, grinding famine began to move across the lands of men, and with it came a fear that even the richest sacrifices offered on the high altars could not quiet. Mortals prayed to Zeus with increasing desperation. The other gods, who had at first regarded Demeter's grief as a private matter, began to feel the weight of a world that was ceasing to feed the living, and, in time, would cease to feed the gods themselves through the smoke of offerings. Still, Demeter would not relent. She wandered the earth in the guise of an old woman, her divine radiance veiled beneath a dark cloak, carrying the grief of a mother who had lost the one being she loved without reserve. At Eleusis, she rested for a time, and there she nearly burned away the mortality of a human child in the fire of her grief and power before the boy's mother stopped her. But even that brief sojourn could not distract her from the absence that hollowed the world. She sat in silence for long stretches, refusing the company of gods and men alike, while the earth continued its slow descent into barrenness. At last, Zeus understood that the world itself was being unmade by her sorrow, and that no kingdom, neither his on Olympus nor Hades beneath the earth, could endure if the cycle of growth was broken forever. He sent Iris and then other gods, one after another, to plead with her, offering gifts and honors and the restoration of her place among the deathless ones. She refused them all. She would not return to Olympus, nor would she restore the green life of the world, until she had looked upon her daughter's face again. And so a bargain was finally struck in the high places of the sky and the deep places of the earth. Hermes, the swift messenger, was sent into the underworld with the command of Zeus. He found Persephone seated beside Hades on a throne of dark stone, her face pale from the long absence of sunlight, yet wearing the quiet dignity of a queen who had begun to accept the realm that had claimed her. Hades, who had grown attached to his silent bride, agreed to release her when he heard the will of Zeus and the suffering of the upper world. But before she left his halls, he walked with her through the dim gardens of the dead and offered her a ripe pomegranate, its skin the color of old blood. Hungry after her long captivity, and not yet understanding the full weight of the law that governed that place, Persephone took the fruit and ate several of the bright red seeds. By the ancient law that bound even the gods, whoever eats the food of the underworld must return to it. When Hermes brought Persephone back into the light and restored her to her mother's arms, The joy of their reunion was real and fierce, and almost violent in its intensity. Demeter held her daughter as though she would never again allow the world to take her, and for a time, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath in relief. Yet the pomegranate had already done its irreversible work. Because she had eaten of the fruit of the dead, Persephone could not remain forever in the upper world. For a third of every year, she must return to the realm of Hades and sit again upon the dark throne as his queen. During those months, Demeter withdraws her blessing from the fields, and the earth sinks into cold and barrenness, the trees standing like mourners, and the soil refusing the seed. When Persephone rises once more from the depths and returns to her mother's side, the goddess of the grain rejoices without restraint, and the world answers with green shoots breaking the soil, with opening flowers, and with the long, generous warmth of summer. Thus the seasons were written into the order of things. What had begun as a private grief between mother and daughter became the great rhythm by which all mortal life would measure its days. Growth and harvest, decline and waiting, loss and return. The fields remember the bargain even now. Every winter is a shadow of Demeter's mourning. Every spring is the echo of Persephone stepping back into the light, her hands still faintly stained with the memory of pomegranate. And so the story ends not with victory or defeat, but with a balance that is both mercy and sorrow. The mother regained her child, yet never entirely. The daughter returned to the sun, yet remained bound to the dark. And the world of men, which had nearly perished in the goddess's grief, was given the gift of seasons, a gift that still asks each year the same quiet question of every living thing. What are you willing to lose in order to have what you love return to you again?